Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Hillbilly Think Tank. I am Spencer Keck. I am a candidate for magistrate here in District 3 of Hardin County, Kentucky, where we live for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Anything that obstructs that, well, y'all, that is just intolerable. And y'all, I am the educated hillbilly. No, that's not an oxymoron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies here in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone. I am one of the Cumberland Gap originals. So, y'all, I am here to talk about what is happening in Washington, D.C., that every working family in Hardin County needs to hear about. So, it's just after midnight. This all happened yesterday, June 3rd, 2026. But the first thing we need to be concerned about here in Hardin County is the House of Representatives voted to block the president from continuing a 3-month military campaign against Iran. About time. A war waged without a single vote from Congress. Now, the second thing we're going to talk about tonight, President Trump, Diaper Don, Captain Bone Spurs. He went on camera and said he still wants you to use your tax dollars to reimburse people convicted of rioting at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, including people who violently assaulted police officers. They killed one and others died afterwards also. Now, on the surface, these looks like two separate stories, y'all. One is about war, one is about money. But here's what I want you to hear today. They're the same story. They are both about a federal government that has decided it does not answer to you. That your money, your sons and daughters in uniform, your safety, your police officers, your tax bill, none of those things requires your input or your consent. Now, y'all, I am Spencer Keck. As I said earlier, I'm a Navy veteran, combat trained hospital corpsman, independent duty corpsman even. By the time I finished my career, the last half of my career, I'm a Fleet Marine Force corpsman, public school teacher, former VA employee, and as I said, a candidate for Hardin County Fiscal Court, District 3 Magistrate. Today, I want to talk to you about what accountability actually looks like and why it starts right here at home. Because y'all, home is where not only the heart is, but all politics is local. And we know that here where we live. All right, y'all. Well, I just wanted to play this for you because, in my opinion, this is exactly a video that encapsulates what Donald Trump's Iran strategy is. So watch this here.
In this farewell, there's no blood, there's no alibi. 'Cause I've drawn regret from the truth of 1,000 lies. So let mercy come and wash away what I've done.
So, y'all, President Trump's leadership, it says right up here, during the conflict with Iran has been marked by erratic, counterproductive management characterized by excessive threats, impulsive decisions, and a clear inability to anticipate the consequences of his actions. Amid a naval blockade of Iranian ports and heightened tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, his approach has alternated between declarations of imminent victory and apocalyptic warnings about the destructions of civilian infrastructure and the death of a civilization, unnecessarily escalating hostilities and undermining any prospect of a stabilizing peace treaty and negotiation. And it's generating a genuine risk of regional destabilization, revealing profound limitations in its capacity to conduct international crisis with rigor, foresight, and prudence that the office demands. I can't say it better. Again, just look at that. This is really exactly what it looks like we've got going on in the White House, in the way that they act like they're running this war. I've never seen incompetence as bad as this. I mean, you tell me of a more incompetent example of how to run a war, and I'd like to see it, because this to me just takes the cake. All right, y'all. Now, I also like to think, hey, if high gas prices upset you, well, remember, it's a small price to pay for a nuke that didn't exist and a strait that was already open. Now, y'all, I fought a war based on a lie, that yellow cake uranium that did not exist in Iraq. And here we go. We're just using the same frickin' playbook once again to kill young men and women in this nation. And for what? Other question is, for who? So that's the question we should all be asking. We should all be demanding answers for that. So once again, couldn't say this better. Picture says it all. Whoever wrote that, geniuses. All right, so back to the show. Again, right here at home, we've got to talk about what it is that accountability should look like. So, no vote, no war. The House War Powers Resolution. Let's start with the War Powers vote, because I have a personal stake in this one. And so does every military family in this country. The Constitution of the United States says that Congress declares war, not the president, Congress. Article 1, Section 8. That's not a technicality. That's the fundamental design of our democracy in a republic. The founders were explicit. They did not want one person to have the power to send Americans to die without the consent of the people's elected representatives. We'd already seen what it's like when a king of England or any other European power could send people to war willy-nilly and dwindle the lives and other resources of that nation. England bankrupted itself fighting us and fighting the French at the time of our inception as a nation. And then you look at what happened in Russia. They bankrupted themselves fighting wars before they were overthrown. in their revolution in the early 1900s. So our founding fathers did not want one person to have that much power over the military. Yes, we call him the commander in chief, but that is only after Congress allows the military or deigns it time for the military to wage war. And that's supposed to be a representative for each of us, getting feedback from us to make that decision. So, again, they did not have one person to have the power to send Americans to die without the consent of the people's elected representatives. And for the last 3 months, Captain Bonespur's administration has been conducting military operations against Iran. Strikes, deployments, a full military campaign, and Congress never voted on it, not once. We've lost 2 Kentuckians from right here out of the 15 that have died so far. Today, the House of Representatives voted 215 to 208 to pass a war powers resolution, a measure that would block any further military action against Iran. A handful of Republicans crossed the aisle to make it happen. One of them was Thomas Massie of Kentucky, the same congressman who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act we covered the last episode. Whatever you think of Massie's politics overall, he has been consistent on one thing: the Constitution means what it says. Speaker Mike Johnson had already blocked a similar vote 2 weeks ago when it looked like it might pass. Think about that for a moment. The Speaker of the House used his procedural power to prevent Congress from exercising its constitutional authority over war. Sound familiar? Different gavel, same move. The vote today was just the first step. It now goes back to the Senate, which advanced similar legislation back in May. 4 Republican senators joined nearly all Democrats to move it forward that time. Whether it ultimately passes and whether the president would sign or veto it remains to be seen. But here's what matters to me and what should matter to every single family here in Hardin County, Kentucky, where we love our life, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness. We have tens of thousands of military veterans in this region. Fort Knox is right here in our backyard. Families in this district have sons and daughters who wear the uniform. And for 3 months, those service members have been deployed into a shooting war with a foreign nation without a single member of Congress casting a vote on it. I wore that uniform. I trained as an independent duty corpsman, Fleet Marine Force qualified, to be the last line of medical care for sailors and Marines in combat, often without a physician present. I was their doc. They called me doc. I know what it means to be the one keeping someone alive while the people who sent them into harm's way are back home in comfortable offices. And I can't say that enough. And yes, if you see my plaque back here, it's a little bit on the nose, but only the finest. Keck Distillery. Yeah, because that's what they called me. They called me Doc Keck. And I wore that uniform proudly. And I know, again, what it means to be that person that's keeping someone alive while those folks back home are waiting for them to come back. You know, and I also know that when people send us into harm's way, they're back home in their comfortable offices, kicking back, and they get to drink their Mai Tais or whatever drink they like every single night. And they're in no way close to harm's way. The War Powers Act was passed in 1973 specifically to prevent presidents from doing exactly what just happened. It requires congressional authorization within 60 days of committing forces to hostilities. That deadline passed. The White House didn't ask for a vote. They just kept on going. That's not democracy. That is one person deciding that the rules don't apply to him. And the people who pay for that decision with their lives, with their grief, with their tax dollars are families just like yours, just like mine. I've got a grandson graduating from high school today who's trying to put on the same Navy uniform that I wore and that his uncle wore. So this, you all, this is not a joke. This is not something that we can all act like it's just a playful matter. It's the heartbeat of our nation and of our county. That is what is at stake. Now, segment 2, your tax dollars for rioters. Man, the Anti-Weaponization Fund and January 6th. Now let's talk about the second story, and I want to be precise here because the facts are important. On Wednesday, President Trump gave an interview to the New York Post. The reporter asked him directly, have you dropped the Anti-Weaponization Fund? Captain Bone Spurs said, no, a court ruled against it. He then described people convicted in connection with the January 6th Capitol riot as, and I'm paraphrasing his words here, great people who were wrongly imprisoned, some of whom took their own lives and who he believed should be reimbursed by what he called a crooked government. Now, here's the background you need to understand what this fund actually is. The Department of Justice announced plans to create a $1.8 billion fund. That number is not a coincidence. It's a deliberate reference to 1776. So the exact number is $1.776 billion fund. And as part of a settlement, the IRS reached over a lawsuit Trump filed about the unauthorized disclosure of his tax returns. Of course, all presidents before him released their tax returns to the public because they were transparent. But the president filed a lawsuit against the IRS over the unauthorized disclosure of his tax returns. In exchange for dropping that lawsuit against the United States government, the IRS and the Department of Justice agreed to create this fund to compensate people they say were victimized by the prior federal government actions. Now, the problem, y'all, and the reason it drew bipartisan opposition in Congress is that Trump officials refused to rule out using that fund to pay people convicted of violently assaulting Capitol Police officers on January 6th. We've all seen the pictures of the police being beaten with flagpoles, with barricades, with doors being smashed into their head and fracturing a police officer's skull, him crying out for his dear life. Just days before today's interview, or I should say yesterday, since we're a few minutes past yesterday, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche told Congress 3 times in a congressional oversight hearing, we are not moving forward with the fund. That was yesterday. Today, Kankles, also known as Diaper Don, or some people call him POTUS Trump, went on camera and said the opposite. Now, here's the piece that ties directly back to our last episode. That oversight hearing where Blanche testified, the one where Representative Madeline Dean was trying to ask about the Epstein files and got gavelled down 3 times by Representative Hal Rogers of Eastern Kentucky. That was the same hearing, the same day, the same room. While Rogers was silencing questions about the Epstein files, Blanche was 3 rows away telling Congress the January 6th fund was dead. And the president was apparently watching from the White House getting ready to contradict him on camera. The left hand and the right hand of this administration are not coordinating, and they're not just not coordinating, they are actively contradicting each other in public. And the people holding the bag, those of us left holding this horribly big bag, are you and me, the taxpayer, the working family in Elizabethtown trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and gas, the folks out in Colesburg trying to figure out how they can even pay the gas that it takes to get from Colesburg all the way over to either Sam's Club, Walmart, Aldi, Kroger, Payless Groceries, wherever they decide to get their groceries. That's still a commute. That's still gas. And we have an affordability problem, and yet we're being told that taxpayers need to pay this fund to violent criminals? Let me be very direct now. I gave 12 years of my life to this country in uniform, and then I gave another 8 more after college. So I gave a total of over 20 from 1990 to 2014. I served alongside men and women who took an oath to defend the Constitution, the same Constitution that was under attack on January 6th. The Capitol Police officers who entered the building that day, some of them died, some of them took their own lives in the aftermath. Many were seriously injured, gravely injured. They are now watching this administration float the idea of using their tax dollars to compensate the people who violently and eagerly beat them. 2 former Capitol Police officers have already filed suit against the Trump administration over this fund, and it is a slush fund. They put their bodies between a mob and the United States Congress, and this is what their government is considering doing with their money? That is not something I can or ever will stay quiet about as a man who wore the uniform for years to protect this nation. So, what does this have to do with Hardin County? Well, first, let's just take one more look here at something that is right alongside this. Talk about grift. There is another grift going on that we should all be aware of. This is the ICE agent involved in Renee Good's case, the one who shot her multiple times in the body and in the head. He is now a millionaire through online fundraisers. Now, don't we think there's something wrong with that? That you become a millionaire for shooting a mom who had just dropped her kid off at school? I think there's something wrong with that. From all accounts that I've heard, she's a good Christian woman. Part of the American way is being a good mom, taking care of your kid, making sure they get to school on time. Special needs kid at that, now motherless. So here's what it has to do with Hardin County. We're connecting Washington to District 3 in this segment. Now, I know some of you are thinking, Spencer, I live in Hardin County. I've got real problems right here. I need roads fixed. I need EMS that actually shows up. I need to be able to afford to live here. What does any of this have to do with my life? Well, everything. Let me explain. The federal government is not some distant abstraction. It is the largest employer in this region through Fort Knox, through the VA, through federal contracts, through the school funding formula, through the Medicaid dollars that keep local hospitals open, such as Baptist Hospital. When Washington decides to spend $1.776 billion on a slush fund for political allies, That is $1.8 billion that is not going to infrastructure bills that fix our roads. That is not going to the rural EMS funding that keeps your ambulances staffed. That is not going to the VA that serves our veterans. And again, we have more veterans per capita in our county than any other county in this state. One of the highest per capita in the nation. Every dollar that disappears into political reward is a dollar that never finds its way to Hardin County. And the war, let me be clear about this if you didn't know it already. War is expensive. The Iran campaign has cost billions. That cost will show up in the federal budget. And the federal budget affects every grant, every formula, every program that filters down to counties like ours. Fort Knox families, military families right here in the district have had loved ones deployed into that campaign without a congressional vote. Some of those families are your neighbors. Some of those kids went to school with your kids. We talk a lot about fiscal responsibility in local government. I talk about it constantly because as a magistrate on the fiscal court, if you elect me, my job is literally to be responsible with your money, your county tax dollars, your road levy, your EMS funding. But fiscal responsibility is not just a local conversation. It is a value statement. And when the people at the top of the federal government decide that accountability is optional, that they can wage a war without a vote and reward allies with taxpayers' money, that culture of unaccountability does not stay in Washington. It trickles down. It shows up in county governments where no one asks hard questions. In budget meetings where the numbers don't quite add up and no one wants to know why. In EMS districts that are chronically underfunded while other line items seem untouchable. And we've seen this. Go watch the fiscal court meetings. Go listen to them. Now, I spent years in the VA system watching exactly how bureaucratic unaccountability hurts real people. Veterans waiting months for care until the Biden administration and the Obama administration when I worked in the VA. We finally got the Care in the Community bill through under those two administrations. Things that started turning around. But then what happened? Doge and a wrecking ball. Then back to veterans waiting months for care. Administrators protecting the system instead of the patient. Nobody asking the hard question, who is this actually for? That is the question that I will ask every single day that I sit in the fiscal court in Hardin County. Who is this budget actually for will be my question. Who does this contract actually serve? Who benefits from this decision, and is it the people of District 3? That's my word, and I will absolutely stick to it. Now, here in this segment, the thread, tying all three of these episodes we've had so far together. We're 2 episodes into this podcast now, and I want you to see the thread running through all of it because it's the same thread. Episode 1, a congressman uses a gavel to silence questions about the Epstein files in a congressional oversight hearing. The acting attorney general sits there and does not have the answer. Episode 2, just yesterday, June 3rd, that same acting attorney general tells Congress the January 6th fund is dead. The president goes on camera the next day and says it isn't. Congress votes to rein in a war that was never authorized. The speaker had already tried to block that vote once, but finally, success in the House of Representatives, heading to the Senate. So the thread is this: the people in power have decided that oversight is optional, that accountability is something that happens to other people, that the rules, the Constitution, the War Powers Act, congressional authority, the plain meaning of testimony given under oath apply only when convenient and get gavelled away when they're not convenient. I'm not running for Congress. I am running for District 3 Magistrate here in Hardin County's Fiscal Court. That is a local office. It involves local roads, local budgets, local EMS, local decisions. But I believe, and I've always believed this, that the character of a government is set at every level. That the culture of accountability or unaccountability starts somewhere. That either it gets modeled by people holding office or it doesn't get modeled at all. And that voters who demand better at the local level are the voters who eventually change the bigger picture. You deserve a magistrate who reads the budget line by line, who asks who benefits, who doesn't gavel down the hard questions, who remembers that the money being spent is yours, earned by you, taken from your paycheck and owed back to you in the form of roads that work, ambulances that actually come, and a government that tells you the truth. That is why I'm running. That is what this podcast is about. And that's what I will bring to the Hardin County Fiscal Court. You can take that to the bank. All right, before we move on here, I'm going to say hello real quick to Jonathan. Jonathan, good to see you again tonight. Jonathan says, foreign PAC money is seeing their return on investment. You're absolutely right. That is another thread right here in this too. So, closing argument, segment 5 here. Let me leave you with this. Today, the House of Representatives, by a narrow margin, 215 to 208, said that one person does not get to decide alone to send Americans to war. That is a constitutional principle that predates every person currently serving in Washington. It was written by people who had just fought a revolution against exactly this kind of unchecked authority. Now, someone else was looking at earlier also gave a report on this that is basically live. We'll check that out and then I'll close this out.
About an hour ago to limit war powers for Donald Trump in Iran. Right now, they are debating to limit war powers for the United States Armed Forces in Lebanon. And they got this second one to the floor with a discharge petition. Discharge petition is a massive blow to Mike Johnson.
Let me make sure I look at you, my colleague here on the right. We cannot bomb our way to peace. True safety is not realized.
She's talking to Brian Mast.
By a bomb or via chokehold of suppression or oppression. I want to urge my colleagues to support this war powers resolution.
Recognize myself, Mr. Speaker. I hope my
The IDF
colleagues not
fuck.
leave. I would love to speak to you as well. I have a serious question for you if you want to approach a mic.
This should be good.
My understanding is you want to help Lebanese civilians.
So why are we allowing someone from the Israeli Defense Force to address Congress and convince them not to vote the way that the American voters want to vote?
I want to make sure that we no longer are using our authority, our bombs, our resources to bomb children. That's what I want to do.
Okay,
I want to
so
make sure that
let's say
money is
children.
going to healthcare,
Children.
housing, education,
Reclaim.
things that your
To do
constituents
this
need.
correctly,
He completely ignored
It shows
all
you
I'll
that
reclaim my time.
unless
the things that she said prior about the journalists and the women and children.
because you want to be
And it also ignored the fact that we've given Israel $300 billion. And that $300 billion pays for their health care, for their schools, and for their military. What return have we gotten?
able to make up your own answers. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
They want to go back. They don't want to talk about Hezbollah. Still yet no mention of Hezbollah from our colleagues over there. They don't want us to talk about the support the United States Armed Forces are giving to the left to combat Hezbollah because they're not acknowledging them. And apparently they don't want to see Israel killing Hezbollah, even though it's Hezbollah that
How
is
many
killing
times is he going to say
Israeli
Hezbollah?
children. I'm going to yield some time to my colleague, Mr. Miller here. 4 minutes, please.
Terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, not the United States and not Israel, as that country has come out more of the gentlelady's mouth in the United States, and I believe that's who she's seeking to remove from Lebanon. But if my colleagues on the other side actually cared about the people of Lebanon, which it's clear they don't, they would cheer on the elimination of these bloodthirsty terrorists, not advancing meaningless resolutions to denigrate.
I watched a video of white phosphorus being dropped on a Lebanese town indiscriminately yesterday. By the way, Max Miller got accused of domestic abuse by his ex-wife last month.
No nation can be fully sovereign when an armed group operates outside the authority of its elected.
Get loud and say scary words. The Republican playbook. Max Miller used an organized campaign of private investigators, false rumors, all sorts of shit to go after his ex-wife. And there he is on the floor being aggressive towards a woman member of Congress. When Mike Johnson was asked about Max Miller, his response was, he's got to work that out. Fuck the Republican Party. Congress voted about an hour.
So, once again, this is about us and our economy overall. And it's about lives of American men and women, our sons and daughters, my grandson, that we put in harm's way. It better be something decided by Congress. But today, the President of the United States said on camera in a recorded interview that he still wants to use your money to reimburse people who attacked the Capitol, contradicting his own acting attorney general's sworn testimony from the day before. Now we've got to remember the constitutional principle, again, that predates every person currently serving in Washington, was written by people who had just fought a revolution against exactly this kind of unchecked authority. But again, those things happened today, on the same day that a Kentucky congressman was using his gavel to protect the powerful from answering for the Epstein files. When I say today, actually meant yesterday. I keep coming back to the same question. Who is the government for? Not as a rhetorical flourish at all, as a literal question that every elected official, from the President of the United States to the District 3 Magistrate of Hardin County's Fiscal Court, should have to answer out loud on the record every single day they hold that office. Now, I have my answer. The government is for the working family in Radcliffe trying to stretch a paycheck. It's for the families out in Colesburg farming, wondering how they're going to afford their diesel. They already had trouble affording to be able to put the urea on the ground that they needed that didn't come through the Strait of Hormuz, so they couldn't fertilize their crops. It's for the veteran in Fort Knox who deserves to know why they were deployed and their families. It's for the teacher in Elizabethtown who can't afford to live in the county where she works. It's for the family calling 911 at 2 a.m, hoping the ambulance comes in time. That's what it's for. And that's what I'll work for. Again, I'm Spencer Keck. I am a Navy veteran, hospital corpsman, teacher, public servant, candidate for Hardin County Fiscal Court, District 3 Magistrate. Keep asking the questions that they don't want to answer. And remember, through this, all of this, we are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. And we are folks here in this state that understand that if we do those things, then we will be united, and united we stand, divided we fall. Y'all remember everyone deployed right now. They are actually bearing a burden that you've never understood. I hope, except for those of us that are veterans that have seen kids die in combat, that have seen bombs drop that we didn't ever intend to drop on people that we didn't intend to kill. You're going to say, oh, that's war. But war is not a beautiful thing. Now, the freedom that we've derived from some of our wars, that's a beautiful thing. But we cannot abuse our liberties by saying that every single conflict that a president decides to send us into willy-nilly is just about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This war is not granting us that. So y'all, remember everyone deployed. Bless your corazon. Thanks for staying up late with me. I just did it this late tonight because I'm going to be out and about being active in the community tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure I did a video drop for today, the 4th of June. Bless your corazon. Have a great one. Sleep well.
Your great-grandfather didn't grow stock runners because they were simple. He grew them because when the bank foreclosed on farms across the